News.
Happy Friday, monsters. We are thrilled that you chose to spend another Friday with us and honored that you made sure not to miss our latest episode. Each episode of the Murder News podcast also serves as a weekly meeting for our very own true crime cult.
But not to worry, you've landed in the cult with all of the adorable baby goats and none of the brainwashing. Grab a flower crown, take a seat around the campfire, and get ready as we dig into true crime history and pull up another terrible tale of murder.
If you're just finding us now, allow us to introduce ourselves, your charismatic leaders. I'm Angelina, your favorite crime-solving pixie, and I'm here with the real housewife of true crime, Aurora. How's your week going?
Pretty uneventful so far, just playing nurse to a sick husband and hanging out. How about you?
Also pretty uneventful this week. I'm sick, so
Aww.
I'm having my own chill time, but I have no nurse, so that's a bummer, but I'm fine.
Oh, I wish that I was there to
Me too.
recommend herbs and make sure you're drinking enough water and getting naps.
And have movie nights with me.
Yes, movie nights.
Aw.
That's the best. That was one good thing about having a sick husband is I have plenty of things to talk about at the end of the episode about what I've been watching.
Right. Oh, very good.
Well, we are still accepting pledges to the MMN commune. It's easier than ever to join our blossoming true crime community. Just pop over to patreon.com/MurderMurder.news and sign up for just a few bucks a month. Your support helps keep the true crime lights on, and to show you how much we appreciate it, we'll give you your own fancy title like Grandmaster of Goats, a shout out on the show, and of course, you'll have exclusive access to our regular patron-only content.
We want to give a warm welcome to the newest member of the Monster Commune. Thanks to Kimmy for joining us on Patreon. Welcome to the cult, Kimmy, and we hope you enjoy your very own baby goat, who we've named Hans.
We want to give a shout out to a listener who left us a review this week. We really appreciate the feedback. And if you all want to hop over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review, we'd be so happy to read yours out loud in our next episode. Steffi G 2020 said, "Great chemistry. I love the dynamic between the hosts, and I really love the approach to the stories. They are all approached with kindness and respect for the victims, telling their stories in a genuine manner." Thanks so much, Steffi. We really appreciate the feedback, and that's exactly what we strive for, is to be respectful to the victims. So thank you so much for that.
Let's check out some of the true crime stories that have been making headlines this week.
There have been some new developments in the case of the murder for hire of former reality TV star Andre Montgomery Jr. Montgomery appeared on OWN's Welcome to Sweetie Pies alongside members of his family who ran a St. Louis restaurant. The show first aired in 2011 and ran for 5 seasons. Andre Montgomery was shot to death in 2016 by Travell Anthony Hill, who was hired by Andre's uncle, James Norman. Hill pleaded guilty in June, and Norman was convicted in September of this year. This week, 44-year-old Wael Rebbe Yegem was sentenced for conspiring with James Norman and helping him obtain a fraudulent life insurance policy on his nephew. The policy was arranged to pay out $200,000 if Montgomery died of anything other than natural causes, and an additional $50,000 if he died within 10 years of the policy's issue date. Disgraced insurance agent Wael Yegem will spend 3 years in prison.
This past Monday, a Montreal teenager pled guilty to the attempted murder of his high school art teacher. The teen, who cannot be identified because he is a minor, stabbed 42-year-old Maxime Kenuel at JFK High School in the Saint Michel area of Montreal in December of 2021. Multiple students witnessed the attack that caused injuries to Kenuel's chest and shoulder, which required surgery. The school went into lockdown, and the assailant was arrested about an hour after the stabbing. This week, the 17-year-old perpetrator was sentenced to 2 years in a youth center and 1 year of surveillance.
We'll be right back after a quick commercial break from one of our fellow Darkcast podcasts.
Hi, I'm Ashley, a true crime fanatic.
I'm Dan, and I don't know anything about true crime.
Together, we host Fuck That, a true crime podcast that covers cases that highlight important topics that are often overlooked, such as wrongful convictions, domestic violence, and social inequities, sprinkled in with the occasional case with spooky themes. If you are looking for your next true crime fix delivered candidly with a hint of sarcasm, you can listen and subscribe to bi-weekly episodes of Fuck That wherever you listen to your podcasts. And don't forget to give us a follow on Facebook and Twitter at @FThatPod and at @FThat_pod on Instagram.
And we're back.
Before we dig in, we want to offer a quick disclaimer. Though we joke about forming a true crime cult, that is not to diminish the severity of actual cult activity, and we want you to know that we take the cases we're discussing very seriously.
We want to deliver each story with the utmost respect to victims and anyone involved. If you feel we've missed the mark, you don't like our tone, or if you notice we've gotten any details wrong, let us know with a quick email to MurderMurder.news@gmail.com and we'll make it right. Some specific trigger warnings for this episode include graphic descriptions of violence and sexual assault. So if any of those are particularly sensitive subjects for you, you may want to skip this one and listen to one of our other episodes instead.
14 years ago this week, a heinous crime hit a quiet residential area of New York City, and its mysterious perpetrator evaded capture for years to come. 6 years ago this week, the case came full circle, and loose ends were tied up just as a broken family acknowledged the anniversary of the loss of a loved one. Sources for today's story include the Queens Chronicle, the New York Times, The Patch, and the Daily News. It doesn't look like this case has ever been featured on a crime documentary series or podcast episode before. Working only with news media publications, information is limited, so this will be a shorter episode. Still, the case is worth discussing. The victim was a person of color, which is probably why the case hasn't received much press. Also, the way the investigation unfolded exposed priorities and presumptions made by law enforcement and the community. For a full list of our sources, check out today's episode notes.
November 8th, 2008 was a night like any other. It was a cool 50 degrees in New York City, pretty ordinary for early November. Today's story takes place in Cambria Heights, an ordinary, middle-class residential area of Queens. Single-family homes line quiet streets, tucked away from traffic congestion and the rattle of subway cars. Cambria Heights is a predominantly Black neighborhood, home to many immigrant parents working hard to provide the American dream for their children, many of whom are first-generation Americans. Shirda and Livingston Matthews are Jamaican immigrants who settled in New York with their daughters LaToya, Anita, and Janita. After moving to New York City, the Matthews welcomed a fourth daughter, Sabrina. Shirda Matthews has said that she always dreamed of having an American baby, and Sabrina fulfilled that dream. After a stint in Brooklyn, the family moved to Cambria Heights and made a home out of a modest 2-story home on 234th Street, which is where they celebrated Sabrina's 14th birthday in September of 2008.
Sabrina was a bit mysterious, as any teenager is to their parents. Shirda and Livingston worked opposite shifts, so the family rarely managed to sit down for a meal all together. Sabrina was studious and considerate and seemed to have plenty of friends, but never brought any boyfriends home. She was a freshman at Martin Van Buren High School, around 5 miles from home. Sabrina was so smart that she earned the nickname Brains, but she didn't always do well in school. Her teacher once phoned Mrs. Livingston to report that her daughter showed potential, but advised that she should probably stay away from one particular childhood friend, who she insinuated was promiscuous. That girl later admitted to Sabrina's dad that they had been going out to meet boys together at night. The Matthews worried about their youngest daughter, who Shirda said was too trusting. Sabrina's best friend, Shante Coe, said Sabrina never had a boyfriend, just some male friends she would hang around and see movies with. November 8th was a Saturday night, but Sabrina decided to spend a quiet night in. She hung out watching TV with her dad in the living room until he had to start getting ready for work. Then Sabrina headed upstairs to her second-floor bedroom to spend some time alone. Her mom went to bed around 10:45, and her dad left for work around 11 p.m. Livingston Matthews was working the night shift as a driver for the city's Administration for Children's Services. Shortly after he pulled out of the driveway, Sabrina went downstairs to her mom's room to ask for some Vaseline for her lips. Then she went back to her own room, but wasn't ready for bed. Instead, Sabrina was up late chatting with friends on Instant Messenger, like a typical teenager. Shante Coe said that if there had been anything out of the ordinary going on that night, Sabrina didn't let on. She just said she was bored and tired, Shante has said, describing their last Instant Messenger chat.
Sabrina Matthews got up early for her 7 a.m. shift as a healthcare worker at an extended care facility. Quietly stepping past the dark kitchen, Mrs. Matthews noticed what looked like muddy footprints. Around 6 a.m., she penned a quick note to Sabrina asking her daughter to clean the floor, then headed out to work. Livingston got home from work around 10 o'clock that morning. He gave her some time, but when 1:15 p.m. rolled around, he decided he had let his teenage daughter sleep long enough and went to her room to wake her. He knocked on Sabrina's door, but there was no answer. He cracked the door and poked his head inside, only to see a lump on the floor underneath a bedsheet. He did not expect the gruesome scene that awaited him as he lifted the sheet. Sabrina sat upright on the floor, naked from the waist down. Her throat had been slashed so severely that her larynx was severed. She had been stabbed several times in the face, neck, and arms. Some wounds, like the ones on her hands and arms, were clearly defensive wounds. Police and medical examiners agree. Sabrina fought for her life in her bedroom that night, and her mother hadn't heard a thing. Livingston Matthews called the police, then ran to the neighbor Vincent Oakley's house, crying and very distraught. Oakley said his friend Livingston, who went by Buzzy, told him someone had gone into the house and assaulted his daughter. Sabrina rushed home to find crime scene tape surrounding the property. A friend of Sabrina's described Sabrina's devastated reaction to the scene. Quote, "I saw her mom collapse right there. They were holding her up. She started yelling and screaming. 'Who did this to my baby? Why?' She was yelling, 'Sabrina, Sabrina, Sabrina,' over and over."
Police called to the scene found no signs of a break-in and have never confirmed to the media whether or not Sabrina had been raped. Investigators took away a lot of so-called evidence, including Sabrina's journals, poetry she had written, her computer, and emails. They pried up sections of tile in the basement, which was never returned to the Matthews or replaced. They towed away Livingston's green Honda, which they would keep for months to come as they continued to investigate Sabrina's murder. They took Sabrina's dad down to the 105th precinct and questioned him for hours. During the interrogation, Mr. Matthews was asked to remove his pants, which were never returned to him. Police admit they asked all of Sabrina's immediate family to submit to DNA testing, which they all willingly did, but have asserted that doesn't mean anyone in the family is a suspect. But it probably does mean there was DNA left at the scene by a killer, and they at least wanted to cross-check it. By running background checks, the NYPD learned that officers had been called to the Matthews home 3 times prior to Sabrina's murder, all for altercations between Livingston and Sabrina's 23-year-old sister, LaToya. Police sources shared this information with reporters, which only helped the media and the general public to build a case against Sabrina's father. When asked by reporters whether her father had ever been violent with her, LaToya responded, "No comment. It's irrelevant." Sabrina's oldest sister, then 30-year-old Anita, told the New York Times that people looked at her strangely around the neighborhood. Police spokespersons would neither confirm nor deny for the media whether Livingston Matthews was ever a suspect. Ultimately, authorities privately notified Sabrina that her husband was no longer a suspect, and then the ball was in the Matthews court when it came to relaying information to the media.
After that, Livingston Matthews took it upon himself to perform his own private investigation, feeling that the police weren't doing enough to find his daughter's killer. His wife, Sabrina, shared in that sentiment and has said, if this was a white neighborhood, something would be done. She also feels that the focus of her husband distracted officers from following other leads in the early days of the investigation. The police weren't fond of Matthews carrying out his own detective work. They felt like it might muddy the waters. Chief Police spokesman Paul J. Brown told the New York Times in 2009 that they were conducting scores of interviews and that the heavy-duty case was by no means cold. Investigators that went through Sabrina's computer and emails were looking into about a dozen guys she may have been dating. Some of the guys were obviously just friends, some she may have gone out with, and some seemingly wanted to date Sabrina. The New York Post reported that the cops were looking into whether Sabrina may have met her killer online. Like a lot of teens in the early 2000s, Sabrina was pretty tech-savvy and had even taught her mother how to use a computer. The page has long since been taken down, but Sabrina's MySpace page allegedly described her as 18 years old and married.
Aside from feeling like they had to take the investigation into their own hands, the Matthews simply didn't feel safe in their own home. For months, Shirta slept at a friend's house and said she suspected every guy she saw. She wouldn't walk alone at night anymore, not even in quiet Cambria Heights. The Matthews even went so far as to have bars installed on their windows. Each time I go to bed at night, I check the lock on the door 3 or 4 times, Anita Matthews told the Daily News in August of 2009. The family also shared with the Daily News that they planned to put up posters around the neighborhood on the day that would have been Sabrina's 15th birthday, September 7th. The posters were to announce a reward of $22,000 in return for the capture of Sabrina's killer. The initial reward offered was $10,000, but New York City's Mayor Bloomberg signed an order to more than double the reward. At that time, the Matthews family was still hopeful that someone would come forward with information and police would soon identify a suspect. "Every day in my life, I cry. All I want is justice," Shirta told the Daily News. "I hope they catch the bastard who did this before he does this to someone else," she added. Despite distractions from the investigation, Sabrina's father being interrogated as a possible suspect, and feeling powerless to do anything to help bring the case to a close, the Matthews held out hope for closure, even as the case lingered in cold case limbo for 9 years. A dedicated cold case squad with the NYPD took over the case, led by detectives John Roberts and Gary Haber. The long, drawn-out investigation took its toll on the Matthews family. In time, Shirta and Livingston separated.
November 9th, 2016 was exactly 8 years from the day of Sabrina's murder. Despite a light rain, Shirta Matthews was outside praying on the front lawn of the family home on 234th Street, where she was visited by investigators. Police came bearing good news on this grim anniversary. They had identified and arrested Sabrina's killer. Music to Shirta Matthews' ears. "Thank you, Jesus," she screamed. Then she turned to the nearest detective and said, "Can I hug you, sir?" Shirta hugged both Detective John Roberts and Sergeant Phil Panzarella before a crowd of friends, neighbors, and family members who broke into applause. Rashawn Venable was 16 in 2008 and lived in Queens Village, another quiet family community bordering on Cambria Heights. He resided about 2 miles away from Sabrina. The following year, he was arrested on his 17th birthday for a sexual assault of a 14-year-old girl in Pennsylvania. The victim told authorities that Rashawn was her best friend. Rashawn admitted that she had said no and told him to stop, but he ignored her. Ultimately, he took a plea deal and pled guilty to a lesser charge, indecent assault. DNA evidence collected in the sexual assault case was eventually matched to an existing sample in CODIS, the national DNA database. In 2016, Venable's DNA was matched to DNA collected at the scene of Sabrina Matthews' murder. It seemed like Venable was already serving time for his prior charge of indecent assault when he was discovered to be linked to Sabrina's murder. Rashawn Venable was arrested in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania, and extradited to New York by Chief of the DA's extradition unit, George Verrugia.
District Attorney Richard Brown has said that this case highlights how important DNA analysis is when it comes to law enforcement, adding, "My office remains committed to working tirelessly to ensure justice is done, no matter how many years it may take." DA Brown has also said, referring to the case, quote, "DNA is an important law enforcement tool that protects the innocent and punishes the guilty. In this case, the defendant is accused of a brutal act of violence in which he spent many years eluding identification and remaining free, only to ultimately have his own DNA point the finger at him, end quote. Following the arrest, the NYPD were hailed as local heroes and joined Sabrina Matthews' friends and family in a candlelight vigil.
Rashawn Venables' mother said the family moved out of the city because her son was hanging around the wrong people. He was arrested twice for robbery, joined the Crips, and started going by the street name Wreck. In his first court appearance, prosecutor Diane Ross read a statement written by Rashawn Venable. The statement revealed that Rashawn and Sabrina had a sexual relationship and that sometimes he snuck into Matthews' home when Sabrina's parents weren't there. Shirta Matthews was flabbergasted, reiterating, "I never seen Sabrina with a boy."
In February of 2018, Rashawn Venable stood before Queens Supreme Court Judge Kenneth Holder and pleaded guilty to the second-degree murder of Sabrina Matthews. He was sentenced to 19 years to life in prison. Judge Brown stated, quote, "The defendant has now been sentenced for the cold-blooded and heinous killing of a teenage girl who should have been safe inside her own home. I'm hopeful that the family of the victim will find some comfort knowing the person responsible for this horrific crime will be locked away from society."
Wow. Brutal. And, it just always gets me when teenagers do something so savage, like to be 16 and to kill somebody in such a heinous way, to
really viciously violent.
Just
and
awful.
That what bothers me the most is that he gave no explanation for this whatsoever. Why did he murder her? If they were friends, if they were already having a sexual relationship, we know he had, raped somebody else, so that could have been part of it. But if they were, I don't know, there's no explanation from him whatsoever, so we just don't know.
I'm glad he was caught because he was clearly on this path of destruction after killing Sabrina and raping another girl. I'm so glad that they caught him before things got worse.
Before he continued.
It sucks that he wasn't caught sooner. It took so long to get there. And of course, there could be other victims that just didn't feel safe coming forward of sexual assault if he raped one girl. But wow, so sad.
Yeah, and the whole thing tore Sabrina's family apart in the process, just being that long to solve and that obviously devastating.
Yeah, and that's so common. I had taken a class in high school many, many years ago, short stories and death. And it wasn't specifically about murder, but clearly I was a dark, spooky bitch even then. And it just, one of the things we talked about was just the impact of death of a child on families, and your child dying not just of murder, but a car accident or cancer or some kind of illness increases the chance of divorce by 80% or some high number that's just so easy to blame each other, and your life is just in shambles after losing a child. It's hard to recover.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah.
So let's hear about all the stuff you're watching this week.
Yeah, so I watched a couple of spooky or true crime things and a couple of not, but I thought I'd mention them all. So I see you also watched Killer Sally on Netflix.
Yes. I'm not finished it yet, but I'm partway through.
It's good. It's very...
Did you watch it all?
Yeah, I did. I watched the whole thing.
Oh, you did?
It's very thought-provoking. Definitely a really interesting show. Go check that out. I was struck by Sally's voice reminds me so much of, oh gosh, I can't think of her name, of Stifler's mom.
Oh,
so wonderful.
Jennifer Coolidge?
Yeah, something about her voice and her accent and the way she talks reminds me of her.
Aww.
And it's interesting because I find here, I know that she's killed a man, and we're kind of getting to the bottom of, is it domestic violence or is it not domestic violence?
Right.
In the documentary, that's what it's trying to get to. But I find her to be quite likable as a human, stripping all that away. If you just were hearing her tell stories about bodybuilding and such, it would be wow, she's great. Like she's funny and like likable and whatever. And then it's, obviously this terrible thing has happened.
Yeah, which is the death of her husband that she was responsible for in one way or another. That's the guaranteed thing from the get-go, is that she killed her husband, Ray McNeil, who was also a bodybuilder. But it's being partway through and having obviously read some like random things on Wikipedia and stuff while I was going along, as one does, But I don't know what to think at this point. Like my tendency, of course, is to believe women. So if she's saying she was abused, then, instantly that makes logical sense to me that that's what happened. And then even some of the clips that you see in the early episodes are like just her interacting with her children and stuff like that. It seems like, I don't know, like she's a good person and that, she wouldn't do anything unjust and that, her kids see her that way, it seems as well. So definitely very magnetic personality.
Yeah, really complicated. And, I won't give too many spoilers by giving my opinion now, but I will be covering this on TikTok this weekend. So if you do want to come have a discussion with us about it, hop on TikTok because, I feel like we can chat in a spoiler-free environment there, or we've already spoiled it. So I will spoil it on TikTok.
Spoiler-friendly environment. Yeah.
So come chat with us there. But that was a good one. And then sort of in, like spooky realm, I watched Don't Worry, Darling, which I was kind of like nervous to watch because it's gotten so much bad press from like Olivia Wilde and Florence Pugh.
I feel like it's been all over the place.
Yeah.
But there's definitely been drama, which like I have mixed feelings about as well. But like, how was the movie?
I liked it.
Good. I'm glad it was good.
I liked it. Rick liked it. My husband liked it. And we both were like, if that drama wouldn't have happened, people would have been like, it's not the best movie I've ever seen. But like that was good. Right. It was like a solid kind of like thriller, sci-fi kind of thing. And not like the most innovative concept like involving sci-fi I've ever seen, but like it was still, I didn't quite guess where it was heading in the beginning. Like I thought a number of things, but I didn't quite guess this was where it was heading. And obviously with Florence Pugh, like the acting is phenomenal. Like she's just so wonderful. I could watch her in anything. And I thought Harry Styles did a good job. Like people thought that he was not great and he didn't have the star power and whatever. But like I actually thought he did a great job of playing this sort of like separate style husband where he just wants like the perfect 50s housewife kind of thing. And like, I thought
that would be a real departure from like his like public persona. Sure. So that's interesting. I'm interested to see that.
But yeah, I liked it. Let us know what you think if you are like, no, that was awful. Like, were you drunk?
Yeah.
Maybe I was.
And if you have feelings on the drama, because like, I don't know, I feel like, like I'm hesitant to even mention this, but after the like Johnny Depp Amber Heard drama and how the media was manipulated and the public was manipulated by the media to follow certain narratives and stuff like that, I'm skeptical every time now. And this is like a female director that's going through a divorce with another celebrity man. And I don't know what to think about any bad shit that they have to say about her or her work or working with her, because I'm like, what does it mean? What is the root of this?
I felt the same, and that's why I wanted to give it a chance. And it's just a stunningly beautiful movie. And I think if anybody were to complain about anything, you could complain about the script, you can complain about that. Like if it's not quite your like version of the story, if you find it's too predictable or whatever, but like the direction is beautiful. Like it's nice. The cinematography, the costuming, the acting, like everything else like hits all the notes. Like it's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. And you can't criticize her for that role. Like maybe you could say the script isn't like what you would hope, but I thought it was very engaging. I was very entertained. I was very intrigued. So I have no complaints about it.
Glad
Not
to
a
hear
10,
it.
But maybe like a 7.
A 7 is still great.
Yeah. And then the last thing I watched, which I'll just like mention real fast, is the Weird Al movie with Daniel Radcliffe.
How did you like that?
Although they do bring a true crime element into it.
Oh, yes? Interesting. Is it too much of a spoiler if you mention what the crime is?
I won't explain it. I will just say that it's absurd. And if you don't know anything about what was going on. Like if you are 20 and watching this movie, you will be like, oh, did Weird Al really write Eat It Before Beat It came out? And like I've seen people Googling things like that. And so if you are in your 20s and don't know about Weird Al, you're be prepared to be tricked because it's like 5% reality and 95% fiction.
Yeah,
with intent.
Which is exciting.
Yeah, because like, you know, his whole thing was parroting other songs. And so he's parroting other people's lives in this depiction.
That's hilarious.
So a lot of things that didn't happen. And I won't give any spoilers, but like it's just real absurd. It's very funny. Daniel Radcliffe is just a delight, although I cannot with his American accent. Like,
oh my God. Well, I heard that this movie started with a fake trailer as like on a comedy site. Somebody made the trailer and was like, wouldn't this be fucking hilarious? And then some like director was like, yes, it would be. Right? And then that happened. So that's pretty cool.
I hope that's true. And it's very funny. Like it's quite delightful to watch. So definitely check that out. If you need like a palate cleanser from a true crime, go jump in.
I'm excited
it's
for that
streaming
too.
right
it
now,
looks
so
weird.
It's like for free. So it's I think even on Roku or something. It's very easy to find.
Cool.
How about you?
Well, the other things besides Killer Sally that I watched were I've been watching the series Peripheral on Prime. Have you heard about that?
No.
It's like a sci-fi thriller with Chloe Grace Moretz as the star, and basically it's like she's playing like virtual reality video games and things like that. And her and her brother are, and then they get asked to sort of beta test this new tech. And they find out that it's not virtual reality at all. It's that they like get put into the bodies of these robots, which actually exist in the future. And so they're actually interacting in the future. And there's a whole lot of weird criminal and otherwise things happening there that are just like hard to parse with I think it's like 30-year difference between, because like the time that they're actually in is still the future for us, not super far in the future, but obviously we don't have tech like that now. So it's a little advanced. And then like the future for them is like 30 years in that future. And it just is
interesting.
Yeah, unrecognizable world. The cool thing is there's been some event that we don't know what the heck it was that like all they notice like in the future immediately is like, wow, there's a lot less people than there used to be. So like that's curious, but
nice.
It's pretty fun. And I saw Barbarian on Disney Plus, which have you seen it? You sent me this.
Yeah, I'm waiting to watch it with Mimi, and we want to see another movie on Sunday so we could eat at the VIP theater. But I've heard such great things.
You sent me the trailer for this one, so that's what made me want to watch it.
We opted not to watch this before staying at an Airbnb together.
Yes. Yeah, because it is based on a terror in an Airbnb kind of situation. Yes. So it's like there's kind of two people that book the Airbnb at the same time from different sites, and they wind up in this double occupancy sort of accidental situation. And then something's creepy. Who knows what? We ultimately find out is just so many twists and turns from the first assumption you would probably make. But it does kind of echo a real life true crime case in some ways. It's a little bit embellished, but like not very much, because there's a horrific case. I don't know, like I think I'd be giving it away too much to mention what the case is.
No, you have to tell me what the case is because I want to read about it.
It's Joseph Fritzl. Do you remember hearing about him?
Joseph Fritzl.
In Austria?
No.
So, like, I don't know how much I should go into this because I don't want to spoil anything.
You don't have to tell anyone about the case in case they don't want it ruined, but I just Googled it.
So if you don't want it ruined,
I'm going to look it up. Maybe we'll cover it. Have we covered it?
Yeah, I no, but I was thinking during, like, because I reread all of this stuff after watching this movie, and then I was like, we should definitely cover this soon. So we should find a way, because I don't know if everyone knows about it. Probably not. There's so many cases out there. So I think that'd be a good one to get into because it is next level horrific. Like you could never imagine.
Oh,
so if you know what the story is, maybe you can't immediately guess how that connects to the movie. It's still worth watching anyways, because it is a little bit, of a fictionalized spin. But yeah. super creepy. And the story's super creepy, the real life one as well. And we should definitely talk about that.
Yeah, and it's finally on Disney Plus, so it's quite accessible.
Yes.
I will be watching that as soon as possible.
Sweet. Go watch that. We'll talk about this case, and you folks out there, go watch it and then listen for our future discussion.
Yes.
Well, I guess that's enough murder for 1 week. If you need more, make sure to bookmark MurderMurder.news to stay up to date with the latest breaking true crime stories all week, every week.
And please also follow us on Instagram at MurderMurder.news. On Twitter, maybe. It's in a state of collapse, but if you are still on Twitter at Murder News.
That might not last so much longer.
Yeah.
Take it while you can get it.
Right.
we would probably change our name if we moved to a different platform.
Yes. On TikTok at MurderMurder.news and on Facebook by searching for MurderMurder.news.
While you're there, you can also join our Facebook group, which will also pop up when you search for MurderMurder.news. Group members can look under the events tab to find all the info you need to know about any upcoming events, including our monthly book club meetings. This month, we're reading the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And finally, I'm back on track with reading book club books well in advance of the meeting.
Oh, yay.
This book is so much fun. And since it centers around a book club that's devouring all things true crime, I think we might find some inspiration there for our next round of book club picks. They're mentioning lots of classics, and some of them we've read and some we have not, so I guess we should.
Nice.
So we'll meet on Zoom Sunday, November 27th, and just like last year, I'm thinking about co-opting this meeting as an unofficial celebration of my birthday, so you definitely don't want to miss it.
If you like what you've been hearing each week on the podcast, let us know by leaving our show a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And be sure to subscribe to the show on your preferred podcast platform so you never miss an episode.
Have a great week.
Bye, spooky friends.
Bye.
Murder, murder,